we're not going to waste a lot of time on our meeting this evening. We are going to skip over our little, community building activity that we normally do. We're not going to do that this evening. We just kind of want to get right into the work this evening and for any questions that anyone may have. So we'll turn it over to the board liaison and superintendent if they have an update.
And I was talking to Saul earlier and he said he was going to be here. So I'm not sure what happened. He was going to give a little bit of an update too.
Okay.
I'll just share, this is our first week back without masks. And I had an interesting conversation, and Serena was part of my group not too long ago. It's probably 2 weeks ago, Serena. It was right after the announcement by the governor, and asked, do you think kids are going to continue to wear masks or not? And one of my students from Bella Vista said, yeah, I think about 70% of kids will still wear them. And he sent me an interesting email this week. He said, I couldn't be more wrong. He said probably only about 5 to 10% at Bella Vista. Now, I was at a school today, probably had a little bit more than that. But he made a statement that it was the first time in 2 years that school felt normal again, which I thought was pretty neat. And then he said his biggest problem right now is recognizing the faces of those again. And I just thought that was really some great statements from him. I shared an article with both the board and cabinet this week, though. It's in Education Week, and it's what really is polarizing in schools. And I'll share this one part with you, that they interviewed 357 school district leaders in November. 3/4 agreed or strongly agreed with this statement: political polarization about COVID-19 safety or vaccines is interfering with our ability to educate students. And I think as a leader in this district, and I know, Saul has probably felt it as well, the last 2 years have been difficult, more than difficult, I would say, and there are a lot of people that are trying to decide whether or not they even want to stay in education, because I think the way that people were treated, and it's sad to see that so much politicization has happened in schools. And I'm hopeful that we can get back to the focus on supporting our teachers and our schools, because what's happening in our schools right now really is having a negative impact on our kids. So just thought I'd share that. And I see Saul is on here, so I'll kick it over to him.
I agree. And I'd like to add on to that. I think also it was not having that parent involvement as well. Welcome, Saul.
Thank you. My clock's a couple minutes late. I apologize, but good to see you all.
Glad you're here.
Thank you. Just wanted to say that I think Kent may have mentioned that that we are back where our kids are back, where they have a choice, as do parents, to send their children to school without mask. And as a result of that, I personally visited an elementary school on Monday. I walked through and I kind of counted. Well, first I wanted to see faces, and second I counted each classroom with how many masks. And the principal and I pretty much came to the conclusion that it was about 15% of the kids were still wearing masks. And I texted the high school principal that same day, hey, what do you think? And he said that he also felt it was about 10 or 15%. So it's a good little number out there that our parents and students are still choosing to wear masks. But I think Ken caught the end of what he said, that it's good that children and students and teachers are feeling that we're going to try to get back to normal as soon as we can, if we can do so. That's really all I have that's going on around the district, and look forward to tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Saul. At this time, we'll have a staff report by John.
Yeah. And actually, Kim, we're going to start this evening with Diana.
Okay.
Who's our programs manager in human resources, who's going to share some information connected to one of our Lcap goals and metrics that's focused on recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce.
Awesome.
So Diana, I'll turn it over to you when you're ready.
Thank you, John. Today, I love this topic. I love working. So thank you so much, everyone, for asking to have a conversation about this. I'm going to show some data first. My goal today is to show some data about where we're at. And then I would like to talk to you about some actions that we've been taking over the last year and some exciting new developments as that happens.
Okay.
So first, I just wanted to review, next slide, please, Laura, is just what our current staff demographics look like. And I apologize, on the slide, it must have, I didn't realize that the 4 columns got cut. So the very first column on the left hand is the certificated column. And then the second column is our classified employees. And then the third column is our management employees. So just as an overview, as you look at it, we're looking at, just to give you an example. So our certificated African-American population, it says it's 67. So that's about 3% of our total certificated population. In classified, it's 123, and that's just about 7%. And our management currently is just around 8%. With our student population, because what we want to get to, our goal is getting our staff population to look more like our the students that we serve. And so our student population for African Americans is 7%. Another place I'd like just to point out is our Latinx population. And so our certificated at 263, if I did my math right, that's 13%. Classified is at 20%. And then our management is at 12%, with our student population being right around 23%. One of the things, as you look, if you've ever, one of the onboarding documents that we have is a demographic information. We ask people to identify their ethnicity. On the demographics, I think it's important to note that under white, it does include our Middle Eastern population. So I know, for example, in a number of our classified positions, as well as our certificated positions, we have hired a handful of our Afghanistan population, as well as Iraq and Northern Africa. And when I do many of the onboarding conversations with the new employees, and I notice that they often mark white. So just, I know we want to be able to recognize that we are hiring another diverse part of our population, and it is our goal to figure out how we can best collect that data to be able to share that with our community. And I do not have that data right now, but I just wanted to share one of those barriers. Next slide, please. So this slide is going to be for the 2021 school year, and this is new hires and rehires and the number of staff that we hired. And then the following slide will be what we did this year. So just as a comparison. So just to start with, you can see that in 2021, we hired a total of 365 staff between certificated, classified, and management. And you're going to see a significant difference as we move into this year. Again, just looking at our African American population, that 5 comes out to just less than 3%. Classified is just less than 6%. And for management, that was 25% of the people that we hired that year. So, and then our Latinx population, so the 25 represents 14% of the people hired, the classified represents 13%, and management was 0%. So again, comparing that to our actual demographics, it's still looking very similar. Okay, it's almost in alignment. So then, next slide, please. So 2022, Human Resources has been a little busy this year. We've hired 1,056 new employees this year, or rehires. And then just again, to look at the comparison of that, our African American was just less than 5% for certificated, just over 6% for our classified staff, and 19% for our management staff. In our Latinx, it was 13% for our certificated, classified was 13%, and then our management was 3%. So that gives you an overall data just to, so you have a basis of where we're at. What I would really like to spend the majority of our time is really talking about what actions we are taking. And so if you could go to the next slide, Laura. First of all, I'd like to classify. Let's talk a little bit about classified. We, for example, with instructional assistants, as we walked into June, we had over 400 instructional assistant positions to hire by the start of the year. So we had numerous hiring events. We've been continuing to do those hiring events. In breaking down the barriers for our community, those hiring events assisted people in completing their applications, as well as providing, for example, for instructional assistants, they needed to pass an instructional assistant exam in order to become an assistant, and we provided prep tests as well as classes to help support them. We also partner with IRC, which is a resettlement agency for our refugees, and they provide classes, and our adult school also provides tutoring classes to pass the instructional assistant exam. We provide orientations is going to be more about retention, really providing all of our classified employees a 60-minute start of their career in San Juan, just really getting them oriented with processes and procedures and where to find things to really make sure that they're successful throughout their career here in San Juan. And then let's go back to that instructional assistant. I collected we collected a lot of data over the summer and just really trying to see where there were parts of the math test and parts of the English test that there were struggles, and we were seeing some trends around our refugee applicants that were struggling with that. And so we worked with IRC, the resettlement agency, and really looked at that assessment to see if there was some cultural bias in the assessment. And over the last 4 months, we've made edits to that assessment. So I think as we move into next year, the things that we really looked at were things like slang terms that might not just be proper English, that I think the test writers were assuming that all people understood what those words meant. Looking at the double negatives in choice answers, and just looking at ways where we can just make it open for all people to be successful at those tests. So we are hoping to have those tests updated in our testing system by the beginning of the summer. So that's classified. Things that we've done with the certificated, knowing that we were going to have a number of hires this year, we did offer open contracts, and we started hiring as early as February and March this last year, and really focused on recruiting and advertising and marketing to a number of diverse colleges and universities, sending out recruitment efforts to the Bay Area, as well as LA and surrounding areas for people who are looking to relocate to Sacramento. And I think with our open contract bonuses, as well as our relocation bonuses, that we did draw in a number of people from as far east as North Carolina and Virginia, Texas, and so hopefully increasing the diversity there. The next area, which I could talk about for hours because it actually is the thing that brings me joy every single day as I work on implementing this project, is the San Juan Alder Graduate School of Education Teacher Residency Program. This is a game changer for us, increasing our workforce diversity in our schools. And so just to give you an elevator speech of what the teacher residency program, it is Alder is a graduate school of education that is accredited. We've partnered with them, and we will be doing a teacher residency program for 14 applicants this year, and then 23 in future years. We are recruiting for workforce diversity in hard to fill positions. So specifically special ed, our single subject math and science positions, and world language, and then multiple subject, our transition kindergarten positions. So really looking at doing that. And currently, so we've had our first round of applicants. So we work hand in hand with Alder Education through the entire residency application process, from information sessions to reviewing applications to the interview process. And so we've, during the first round, which ended on February 18th, we have conditionally offered 7 out of the 14 positions that we have offered, with 1 of Asian descent, 2 of African American descent, 2 of Latinx descent, 1 Middle Eastern, and 1 who identifies as white, and she's also a foster youth. So a different way of looking at diversity. So really excited about that. And then continuing to do career development sessions for our classified staff on finding pathways to become credentialed. There's a lot of grants out there right now for instructional assistants to become teachers, and just really trying to share that information with our classified staff as much as possible. And then finally, our management, just really trying to help grow our current teachers who want to become leaders in developing an aspiring administrators program. I know that that's being worked on through the Division of Teaching and Learning, and finding ways to really support our lead teachers to become administrators. I saw something in the chat, and I can stop. I can talk more. John.
Yeah, Diana, are there slides for the content that you were just discussing?
No, just this one slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that information that you can send over to our PAC?
I can send, I have for the Alder teacher residency, I have their slideshow that we do for the information meetings.
Okay.
And I can send that over to the PAC. In fact, I'll put it in the chat after we're done talking before I leave.
Okay. And what about the additional information that you spoke about a few moments ago?
I don't necessarily have that in a slide. That was just from the work that we've been doing.
Is that information that you can send over to us in an email?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure can.
Appreciate it.
And I think there's the anecdotal parts as well. Like example, I think we're really working at, I'll just use a perfect example. I had a young African-American woman who was in my office, and she applied for a nutrition service worker. I'm offering her a job as a nutrition service worker because she was just interviewed. And so I was just chit-chatting with her and just, asking her what her goals are and things like that. And during that conversation, I learned that she had a bachelor's. I learned that she has been working with students with autism. And I'm in my head, I'm like, so you want to start off in a nutrition service worker? Because I have a lot of other jobs that you're qualified for. So really helping them have that conversation to make sure that they get the highest position that's available, that they're eligible for, that they're qualified. I think that has happened quite a bit in the last 3 or 4 months. I had a gentleman from Russia who started off applying for an instructional assistant position. And by the time that we were done, he was a teacher. I mean, so it was just like, but you're more qualified than, I mean, they still have to go through the interviews, they still have to apply, but it's that extra encouragement of you can do this, and just helping them see what the opportunities are in San Juan and how they might build that career. I see lots of hands, sorry,
Yes,
but I just had to share that story because it's so heartwarming.
Great. Yeah, we have Tom and then Amber. Would you like to take their questions now, Diana?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
And Steve, you can direct everyone who has questions, please.
Okay, sounds good.
We have quite a few new PAC members this year that haven't yet been through an annual cycle. So a lot of them are really just now becoming familiar with like the California School Dashboard, as well as the Lcap document itself. So I'm wondering if what your department is doing, where might you think you'll see changes or improvements in what area on the metrics of the California School Dashboard? And that's kind of one question. And also, as you sort of measure the, what you're doing, is there a particular, in the Lcap document itself, is there a particular action, particular action, services, and goals? And part of this is, to help our committee members also relate the presentations we're hearing to the actual plan for the district and where the presentations connect with our plan.
So Gian, you might have to help me with exactly where it is. There is a Lcap action item. It is called workforce diversity. And what section is that in, John?
That's action 1.7. So it's in goal number 1. And then connected to that, there's also a metric that's associated with that as well. That's under goal number 1 as well.
And so really looking at increasing the diversity of our non-white staff. So I think that's the measurement, if I remember right, John, right? It's the increasing the number of our non-white staff.
Yeah. And where would you say that you would think you would see changes on the California School Dashboard there? I mean, it's, I'm guessing that, one of it would be under campus climate, would be that Lcap state priority, but also my guess is, would you think that this would also change the metric of, say, chronic absenteeism, or do you see a relationship there between those metrics on the California School Dashboard and the work of your increasing diversity?
So John, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is attached to our healthy environments. Is that creating strong community environments? So yes, I do agree that it would have an indirect relationship to both absenteeism and students feeling safe and welcome at school.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Tom, I think one of the challenges with the dashboard is going to be the validity of it for a couple of years, because, chronic absenteeism is a perfect example. It is going to go up across the state, and it should, because if we were responsible as a district, then we had kids at home when they weren't feeling well. And so we kept schools open, but kids stayed home. And, Omicron, January was the hardest month. When I talk with principals, they'll say in their entire career. So we keep asking the question, what and when is the dashboard even going to be relevant again? Because, you really can't compare suspension data the last couple of years. You can't compare attendance data. The assessment piece was given minimally. And so we keep saying, when is the state going to decide to even have a reset of that? Because things like our suspension data would look great. Chronic absenteeism would look the other direction, but it's not true data with what we've been through for the past 2 years.
Yeah, although it is in a lot of cases, it's kind of the only data that we have where you can do some sort of, comparison. So,
But if it's not useful, and I mean, we've just been through a pandemic, and so we've never experienced something like this before. And so I don't want people to hang, because again, it could make things look falsely good, like we made improvements, and it could make things look falsely disparaging, both of those situations that we had no control over. When kids weren't in school all last year, for the majority of the year, our suspension data looks fabulous. So everybody would be at the top bar on that. Well, that's not true. So that's where it's going to be really challenging when we think about what year do you even compare data to? So we keep asking the question at the state level. We'll hopefully get some answers soon.
right, but the efforts of that staff is doing is something that will make an impact in certain areas. So that's I think the main thing is to be able to take a look and be able to get some sort of gauge. Are we improving or not? So, but yes, I agree. The pandemic has definitely made it really difficult to measure anything, but it seems like you have to try to find some measurements somewhere to gauge whether you're improving or not improving. So that's all. Thank you.
I'd like to chime in for just a second on that. And this question is for Kent. So what data could we possibly look at that's at the district level to do comparison?
So they're specific to what?
Specific to the question that was just asked.
Well, so are you talking attendance? Are you talking assessments? All of those things. It's really hard to compare anything in the last 2 years to really make it a value. Exactly like I said, suspension data, there's no way you can compare that. Attendance data, there's no way you can compare that. The assessments weren't given in 1920. Last year, they weren't even given at all grades. We do have some assessment data that we're using, but it's not kind of that state level assessment data. And maybe John, maybe you could speak to a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, as I'm looking at our metrics, the state has even told us not to make comparisons to previous years because of all the things that Kent just mentioned. However, I think tonight's presentation by Diana is a great example of where there are things happening even during the pandemic that we have more control over, that is allowing us to measure whether or not improvement is occurring, which is what Diana highlighted this evening, both in the areas that we've gotten better, but also some of the barriers that we're facing as well. So I think the metric that Diana presented tonight is actually a good example of one that we can monitor progress on.
I'm just curious because I know we take attendance on a daily basis for the last 2 years. Why isn't that available? That we can just look at that data?
Well, it is. But why? I guess my question would be, so I'll give you a good example. Our attendance rate this year is below, we're normally around 95%. So last year we were above that because it was virtual and kids were showing up every day. Well, what does that mean? It really doesn't mean anything, because even if a kid was sick, they may be able to check in. This year, attendance rates are running, about 5 or 6% less. We don't see that as a negative issue, because again, if you look at just the number of kids, at one point, I think we had 3,000 students out in January, either for COVID or quarantining issues. So you can't really compare attendance in a pandemic to pre-pandemic. We can show you the information. I just think it's senseless to try and compare it.
Well, I didn't mean to compare pre-pandemic to pandemic, but we had 2 years where there's been the pandemic this year and last year, and school and children were in school last year as well as this year. So comparing those timeframes.
Well, I
can
think,
compare
yeah.
that data.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is you're probably going to see a greater discrepancy between last year and this year than any time in the history of because last year it was really easy for kids to potentially attend school. And this year it's been harder than it ever has been. So we can show you that, maybe it was 96, 97% last year, and this year it's at 89%. What does that tell us? What did we have control over during that time that could have changed that? I would tell you this year, we didn't have control over COVID. And that's what's significantly impacted the attendance rate.
Okay.
And I mean, Omicron's the perfect example. Things were going pretty good. We would look at the attendance every week, every month. It was starting to get a little bit better from the start of the year. Start of the year was rough because we were quarantining a lot of kids when November was a little bit better. And then January, like I said, that's the lowest attendance rate. Most districts were seeing about a 4 to 5% drop in attendance from previous years. I won't even say the previous year, but during normal times. And then in the month of January alone, some districts saw an additional 5 to 10% drop in attendance. I visited one class and there were 7 kids in it. That was 10 days. There were only 7 kids in that class because of how many kids were positive or were needing to be quarantined because of contact.
But can we see data that shows how many students were missing school due to quarantining or due to quarantining versus students who were just missing school for other reasons?
Yeah, I don't know that we have all that broken out that specifically.
I see.
And that was information that Dominic had shared at a previous presentation with the Lcap PAC.
Yeah, but it wasn't
We
broken
have it.
down.
Correct, because that information wasn't available.
I'd like to recognize Amber. She's been waiting patiently to speak, and then we have some comments in the chat. Go ahead, Amber.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. I just want to acknowledge that I feel like we moved really fast here. I had my hand raised momentarily for the statements, the report out made by Kent Kern. So I had an initial question there, and then as we got going, you know how I am, I start taking notes, and there are a couple questions that have popped up. So I don't know if I can go back. Superintendent Kern, is that okay with you?
That's fine with me, sure.
Cool, thank you. And good to see everyone tonight. Per usual, I am cooking, so got my camera off because it's distracting. But I just want to first start off by acknowledging that I have been a supporter of the way that our district has handled COVID-19. I just want to state that from the beginning. I know that it has been very difficult. I know that it is heartfelt work. I know that it pulls at the strings of administrators, of you all as district leaders, of our teachers, and certainly it's been a huge impact to our students. I get all of that. And so with that, I want to go back to the data that was kind of presented at the beginning, or actually, I don't even know if there was data in there, but just kind of talking about the administration teams and sort of acknowledging that COVID-19 has definitely been something that is, needless to say, at the very least, to say time consuming. And so I know that for administrators, there's tracing that has to go into that. There's, all of the people parts of handling those sorts of situations. And in the parent rooms that I have been in, there have been questions raised about what of all the other stuff outside of COVID-19, right? And as I'm listening to what's happening and what we're talking about here in Lcap, I'm feeling like there's a disconnect too, in that our Lcap, we've all experienced it for the past couple of years. We've kind of also been sidetracked because of COVID-19. And so I just want to acknowledge that I think there's an urgency and a passion amongst all of us to kind of get back on track with what we really look at in terms of data. And so I guess my question question going back to the report out, and then like I said, I've got a couple more, is what supports are we putting into place for administrators, for principals, for school leaders, so that they can handle the very tough job of COVID-19 and the school climate and culture, the social and emotional supports, the extra pieces that I feel like get lost when we're handling crisis. What supports are being put into place for administrators in that sense is my first question.
So we're actually in the process of, that's part of that, aspiring administrators and supporting administrators. That might be a good presentation for another day, that we would go a little bit deeper into that, because those folks that are doing that work as well, we could have them come and speak specifically to that. Because one of the things, just like us as individuals, individual administrators have handled this differently, based on maybe the impact that they've seen or they've faced. But what we've learned through this is not everybody, just like students, multi-tiered system of support, we need to have the same for our administrators. So what does that support look like for a first-year administrator versus, a veteran administrator? What does it look like? I was just talking to an administrator today who's likely going to be shifting from one school to another. And the individual said to me, I'm going to need more support next year than I did this year because of the familiarity with the school. So those are the types of things that we're talking about, but that could be something we could bring back at another time. Would that be okay? Because I don't want to take up too much. We could that could be a 10 to 15 minute conversation in and of itself.
Is that okay with you, Amber?
Yeah, I didn't know if that was a question for me or not. Yeah, that's good for me. Thank you. I would like to very much take a look at that. I think that that's something that weighs on me because, again, we're all people doing very heartfelt work, and it's hard, and we all have lives, and I get that. But this is very important work when we're talking about the future and our youth. I also wanted to, piggybacking, well, not piggybacking, I'm taking up some space here. So Diana, good to see you. I miss getting chances to chat with you. I wanted to talk a little bit about, if we could go back to some of your slides. I didn't see the data. It sounded like you were saying that the data for student demographics is comparable to the data for management. And I missed that slide on student demographics, if that was in there.
No, there is not a slide on student demographics.
Okay, so when I checked out greatschools.org, it looks like student demographics for African American students is about 7%. And I think what you had here for management was 3%, which I know that seems like a small percentage, but when we're talking about so few of us, it matters. And so I just wanted to kind of lift that disparity and discrepancy. And then I'm not sure about this because obviously I mark African American / Black on things, and I don't know what the breakdown is when you do go to mark white or Caucasian, or how it kind of drills down to Middle Eastern. But the conversations that I've had with families who are from Afghanistan or refugees from other countries, is that there is some confusion as to what to mark, whether they're Asian or white. And so I just want to lift that as needing to just kind of take a look further at that. If we're looking at grouping them all as white, that certainly isn't how they view themselves. And I think that that's important. American white is very different than white in terms of skin tone, and I hope I'm not offending anybody in saying that, but I think that that's important to name. I also just
Amber,
wanted to
can we address, because let me address the first question. Yeah, I think that the percentage of teachers that we have is 3%. Administration is actually, I believe, 8% African American. The biggest discrepancy we have in the difference between percentage of students and admin is really with our Hispanic population. That's where we have seen the largest discrepancy. I think what did you say? We're at 23% Hispanic and we're at about 12% Hispanic administration. Is that correct?
Correct, and 13% certificated. I agree.
I appreciate calling that out. And I love the marketing strategy of trying to reach out to LA and Bay Area. I don't know if you all know, but I have had the privilege of being in both of those places. I am a Pasadena native. My last point, and then I promise I'm done for now, is just around kind of drilling down attendance. I know that we can say, you know, it's kind of hard to look at that data, but
Amber, you're muted.
You're muted again.
Did we lose Amber?
She
Yeah, I
may
think
have
we
an
did.
unstable connection.
Okay. Steve, is there anyone else who had a question until Amber comes back on and she can continue?
I think she was, I don't want to assume, but she did mention something in the chat. I think that we could compare or would compare current data to data the year before COVID-19 took off, which was spring 2020, right? So the 2018-2019 school year, I don't understand. We'll have to ask for clarification. Kind of on the same point, Tom said decisions still have to be made. If decisions are being made on data, it is of the interest for us to know what data is being used for those decisions. And all data is relevant, right? So.
And I'll just remind the PAC too that this we did our mid-year LCAP review to the board, and we presented the data from 18-19, the present data, at our last meeting that we reviewed as well. So we've been engaging in that.
Yeah, I think it's more of, you know, it's not apples to apples, but it's still comparable. I think is kind of what people are trying to say.
And you know, I'd like to say it's. And I'm not trying to be contrarian to anybody, but it really isn't a comparison because we can share it all with you, but what I would say is it will be more important to review the data related to attendance next year, early in the year. And then, and on the question of data still being, or decisions, correct, but some of the data we can't, you can't use the current data to, or you would make poor decisions because it's not germane to what we're dealing with right now. If it's related to some of the assessments we're doing, yeah, I would say, yeah, 100%. That's just like I wouldn't make decisions to reduce administrators or counselors because we've seen an increased drop in suspensions. So we wouldn't do that this year either. So I will use what data we have that is as comparable as it can be. And I know we all want it to be, but it's not. So we'll share what you want, but we'll compare where we can.
Well, that makes sense. It definitely makes sense. I'm not trying to suggest it's comparable like apples to apples, like I said, but going through the pandemic as a parent and knowing the struggles that other family members have getting to class or logging onto Zoom, and I kind of have an idea why the numbers might be better in some areas and not so great in other areas. But you're right, it's not finite or something you can pin down, but data is still data, and it's good to look at it regardless if it's not perfectly comparable or even close to comparable, but you can learn from it. I think that's kind of all I'm trying to say.
I'd like to ask, are we planning to break down the data in the future, since we are still in the pandemic and we will probably be in the pandemic next year and maybe even years to come? So are we going to potentially look at things differently so that we can have data that we can use per year?
Share a little, when you say break it down, explain a little bit more, like what would you hope it could look like?
So breaking down how many students are actually out due to the pandemic specifically, how many are out who actually have COVID versus how many students are just out because they were maybe around someone who had COVID, how many students are out for other reasons other than COVID, so that we can see what may be happening with our students that's not just COVID related, why there may be absenteeism, and how much of that there is, and could be able to compare that each year.
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that right now, because I'd even have to see what the requirements of the state are in terms of how we are reporting that out. Here's a great example. The guidance has completely changed on close contact and quarantining now. So where before we would be quarantining kids if there was a case in a class, that's not even happening now. So the change that has occurred in the last week compared to all of this year would really skew the data for the rest of this year. And that's my guess as to what it's going to be like going forward. I don't know if you guys check the dashboard daily, but I'll pull it up here real quick. We're currently sitting with 7 positive staff and 37 students. So that number is so far down from where we were at the start of this year. So you're not quarantining students now. Those 37 students that are positive are not having a negative impact on other students in the class, which is a good thing, because now those students are able to stay in class. So our attendance rate, for example, this month, here would be a fascinating thing. Maybe March, maybe use April data. Look at what April attendance data would be and compare it to the worst month, which would be January. And you'll see how just changes in the guidance have significant impacts. Because if we were still having to quarantine kids, our attendance rates would be down. CDPH, they changed the guidance. We're able to follow that guidance. Attendance are going up. So that was nothing we had any control over. That was guidance from the state that allowed our attendance rates to improve. So I'll try and we can figure out what it will look like in the future in terms of what we're required to report. I don't want to commit to us reporting something that's just going to cause more work for staff that may not result in a positive outcome. If we can, maybe that's something we could do.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Is there a plan? Like, are you having discussions about that moving forward? Because I don't see us coming out of the pandemic anytime soon. So it was a question of, are you guys even considering looking at data in a different way, or making changes to where we're able to see data in a different way? That was a question.
Okay.
It wasn't, do you have a plan in place already? It was, are you guys considering making some changes?
I would say at this time, I don't think so. I mean, it's not something that we have been focused on lately. I mean, having kids in school, 100%, but there are so many other things that really have been a priority for us, that we're not having discussions about. Are we going to change the way and how we do attendance? That could be a conversation for another day, but it's not one we're having right now.
Okay. I had a question for you, Diana. I wanted to know, is there a plan for addressing the barriers of separating white staff from, say, like Middle Eastern, Afghan, Russian, Ukraine, and are Russian, Ukraine even in that under white, or is that are they totally separate? Because I didn't hear you mention them at all.
I think they would probably mark themselves as white based on the demographic form that we have. So I know that I'm not necessarily an expert on how we have set up our systems for demographics. I know it has some relationship to how we report to CalPADS. So
Yeah. And I can jump in here too. It's been a frustration we've had for a long time, because we actually don't get to break out the information the way we would like.
Yeah.
So Russian Ukrainian is a great example. They come up as white. The refugee groups, it's like certain nations fall under just these categories. So there are very, very few categories that people can actually be identified as. I think even one of the complaints we've had lately is, I don't believe we have information on our employee group for mixed race, do we, Diana? Because we talked about that. That's a question that we should be asking as well of our employees. Do they identify as mixed race? So some of those, again, it's how it's reported in CalPADS back to the state, that they just get lumped into these big categories.
And then my other question was for specific to representation. Are these staff members spread out in a way to where there's representation at the school sites that match up with the percentage of staff at that school?
So I'm going to answer that with data that I know I was looking at when I was director of equity. And so what I saw, and I'm pulling it back from memory a couple of years, so don't quote me, but I remember seeing, for example, when Cassie was the principal at Dyer Kelly, that there was a higher representation at some schools more than other schools. Okay, so I think there is a difference between sites.
And is that something that may be addressed in the future so that there is representation across the board at school sites?
So I have been doing more of the hiring on the classified side than certificated this year. So I'm going to just speak to what I know and I have experience of. We're in a different world now, that the applicants, they get, it's like it's a buyer seller market. It's more of an applicant market than the employer market. It's more of an employee market, right? So really trying to cater towards the qualified applicants and trying to meet their needs. One of the things that I see that we have been doing is really asking, where do they want to work? And really, especially, for example, instructional assistants. I might have several positions open. And so one of the questions that we ask to make sure that the jobs that we offer are more attractive to our potential applicants is we ask them what region, because we're so large of a district, where they would like to work. And I can tell you that people are really choosing places to work where they live. And that it's close to where they live. So we are always trying to look at increasing diversity across all sites, and just knowing that we are in an employee market, not the employer market. We're really trying to cater to the needs of the potential new employees.
Thanks, Diana.
Yeah. Sorry, that's not the answer you wanted.
That's okay.
It's
Truth
just
is
reality.
always good.
That makes a lot of sense, though. I wouldn't want to commute either.
And then I have another question.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Steve. How many of these staff members are teachers? Is that broken down? Or principals?
On the certificated are teachers. They hold credentials.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah. So all of the certificated numbers are teachers.
And how many are principals and vice principals? Is that broken down as well?
That would be part of management.
Okay. Where can we get the data though for all of those?
That was what she shared, I think, in those first couple
Three
of
slides.
So management is just principal and vice principal? It's
And district office.
no, it would be all management.
Yeah.
all management. So how can we get the breakdown of that?
I could probably break it down. I could add to that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So I've been keeping track. So we're gonna go Tom, back to Amber, Stephanie, and then Serena. So Tom, if you want to kind of go over what you've been saying in the chat.
No, I mean, I was just saying in terms, well, I'll just kind of say what I said in the chat, in that is, well, you can't really compare this year's numbers to last year's numbers. You might be able to compare some data from some sites to data from other sites that basically finds out which sites are still doing well compared to sites which aren't. So it then becomes kind of tends to take out the effects of COVID. So you're just comparing how well a site is doing compared to another site. But I know that also can be very difficult because you kind of have to identify which sites are very similar to each other and then do kind of a comparison. But yeah, I didn't have any further questions. Thank you.
Amber, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, my computer went blank on me, and so you all could not hear me. But thankfully, it sounded like the conversation was continuing in exactly the direction I was hoping to take it, which was about attendance. Thank you for that, Kim. I just, I just want to name the elephant in the room that, again, we are all very passionate as a PAC about the work that we are trying to contribute to the district. And I know that San Juan is a very large district and we have a lot of resources. And so it's just really disheartening and a little frustrating to hear what comes across as excuses. Again, I know that, resources are tight, priorities are placed in other directions, but I think that was one of my points too, is that who's really staying focused on the stuff outside of COVID and the pandemic. And with that, I wonder about breaking down the attendance. To my knowledge, when we call in and we report that our students are out sick, it is coded in a specific way that shows that it's either excused due to COVID or sickness or something like that. And so it just seems like there is some sort of way that we should be able to drill down on a report on a student database that will show us that information. And so I don't know, I'm still sort of new to our PAC here, but I really am hoping that we can get that information, because I just want to acknowledge that there's the elephant in the room, being that we're eager to dive into the domains that are specific to Lcap, and taking a look at attendance is definitely one of them. And again, thank you to Kim, because that was the direction. I just wanted to add that piece for the record.
Welcome, Amber.
Great, thank you, Amber. And Stephanie, then Serena, you're up next.
Okay, for some reason I'm having connecting issues. So Steve, I might need you to step in for me. But I put links in the chat for you guys. My screen's going in and out too. So I want to piggyback on Amber. If you could step in for me about attendance, the calculations. Or Kim, can you do that for me?
I'll say again, Stephanie, what was the last thing you asked?
Can you can you step in for me about attendance issue?
And when you say step in, what do you mean?
Well, what we were talking about, chronic, not being counted for.
Okay, so Stephanie had brought up a point, and I'm unclear of this, so maybe Ken or Diana, you can address it. Stephanie had said that when a student is out due to COVID, that it is just considered a unexcused absence, no matter how many times it is. And so it makes it appear that they are truant. I'm not sure how that works.
Oh, yeah, can we add in, okay, I'm trying to see if I can connect really good if you guys can hear me. Can we add in the kids in foster care? I keep saying this every meeting, they have to go to court, and they have to do a lot of medical and dental, and now add in the COVID or quarantine. So like I said, probably in comments, we were on fake quarantine 3 times until we finally got COVID in the January. So that was 4. So adding those, what, 2 weeks. So basically, and I had notes for majority of this stuff, but it's hard to get documentation when you're waiting, especially court orders and everything else. So it makes it look bad, especially on a parent and a child, and then they're at fault of something they're not at fault of. And then it makes it where they are missing those days of like lab and PE. I think we did a activity regarding participation, and they don't get those credits. And so I just looked at Elnora's portal, and in her lab, it says incomplete. So finding an alternative of when a child is in quarantine and they can't do science or go to school and do lab because they don't have everything in portal. Alternative is like, okay, find the activity they can do that's, they could take a picture that's correlated to that chapter subject, and they'll get that credit for that day. Or like PE, if you're not be a participant, work out at home or do something healthy, take a picture and then send it to your teacher and get that credit for the day.
Stephanie, I don't mean to cut in,
But
but
yeah, but it's just
has
like
it-
the adding up of now it's over 100 days missing. So
Stephanie,
that looks bad.
Stephanie, has anyone ever explained to you about the independent study, the temporary independent study, the 15 days that your students get to do independent study?
But how does that work when they're in sports and they not want to do independent study? They want to be at school, be at normal, do the normal schedule, but things occur and knock that off. And you, as soon as you be on independent study, you don't have that opportunity to have that normal schedule that you usually have before being active and participant in athletic sports. So how does that work? And then as well as you're getting reprimanded for athletic sports because now your grades are dropping and attendance because everything else that you can't control. So that's my point right there. That's a big issue, big, huge issue.
So then I do have a question then for you, Kent, because I know you've seen the data. Have you seen a trend of this happening to pockets of students to where they're missing a lot of school that's COVID related and failing? Because that's what it sounds like Stephanie's going through.
Yeah, and I have
Is
another
that happening
parent.
to other students?
Yeah.
Well, I think we know that when students miss more school, they struggle academically. And so, yeah, that's an experience that students are facing. I think one of the things with chronic absenteeism is that's what we were saying. They don't distinguish between excused and unexcused. It's absences. And that's why we're going to see the chronic absenteeism this year. We were making some progress over that over a number of years. Well, it's going to go so much worse than it ever has been. But definitely as kids miss more school, I'll share an example in talking with a teacher that's really challenging in the instruction. So that teacher that had those 7 kids in that class, she had 18 kids out of her class. So there's no replacement for that in-person instruction that takes place. So if she was teaching key concepts during those 2 weeks, those kids were out, those kids now they come back. And if other kids are coming and going during that time, teachers have struggled all year with that. Serena may even be able to speak to that firsthand as to what happens to kids with when you're out for a period of time and you're not getting that direct instruction. It does not look the same as when you're there. That's going to have a negative impact. So all of the absenteeism this year, 100%, and this isn't special to just what we're dealing with. We're seeing this across the state. You are going to see much lower outcomes, probably, more students failing. You're going to see more need for credit recovery at the high school level because of what's happening with kids missing as many days as they have.
Thank you.
Serena, if you want to respond to Kent about your experience with the students, and then also what you originally wanted to say, either order, whatever you decide.
Okay, I'll start off by responding to students missing school. So I personally didn't miss any school because of COVID. I really lucked out and dodged a ton of bullets, and somehow I didn't miss any school. But what I did experience was for a few weeks in January, the majority of my friends were out of school. Like our classrooms were completely empty. So I think on both ends, there was loss of learning, right? Because if you have a class with maybe 10 kids in it, it's hard to, just go on teaching as you normally do because you have so many kids out. And then on the other hand, you have so many kids who are online. So I think at my school, at least in my grade and the classes that I take, it really just put all of us on pause because everyone was just strained as to what they could learn and what they could teach. So I think at the time, but that was in January, right, where everyone was out. I think in isolated incidences throughout the year when not the majority of people are out, right, it might be different for those students who miss school when no one else really misses school, and it's harder for them to recover when everyone else was just going at a normal pace. So I think January and Omicron was different in the fact that everyone was impacted by that versus like, I know there's one kid out maybe at my school who I know of, right? And he's missing school right now, whereas the rest of us are going to school without masks and kind of just continuing on with life. And when he returns, it's going to be harder for him to catch up. So I think depending on the time of year, it is hard to jump right back in.
Serena, did you have any times where you had teachers out for extended periods, and how
Yes.
did that affect it? I mean, that's
So-
another example.
I had a Spanish teacher who was out for about a week, and I mean, we didn't do much. He assigned book activities, and we all did them. But I think especially with Spanish, it was tough because at least I'm an AP Spanish, so we can only speak in Spanish in that class, right? But we didn't have a sub enforcing that policy, so all of us were speaking in English. And that was right after winter break. So at the end of it, all of us had gone about 3 weeks without speaking Spanish. So it was a tough transition getting back into it. So I think there are some situations where it just really disrupts the learning pattern. And I mean, for me, I'm a very routine person. Like coming back after breaks or even this 4-day weekend, for me, it's hard to get back into it. And I think that really applies to a lot of people just getting back into the routine of being strict and regimented and, getting that learning cycle just in your brain.
I like to tag on to that. I think also it's because there are not enough support systems in place for when students are out. Because when students are out of school, they get packets of work, but they don't have anyone to help them with instruction to complete that work. They have to do that on their own. And that may be one of the struggles too that a lot of students are facing, and parents, is that some of the parents may not know how to help their students with the work, and they don't have anyone else to help them with it. So in just completing it and bringing it back may be a struggle for a lot of students.
I do have a quick question on staff diversity real quick. So my question was, if the district doesn't hire necessarily by school, but rather, takes on teachers and then lets them kind of decide where they want to go teach, how are schools with really low rates of teacher diversity going to adapt and have a more diverse staff of teachers? Because right now the school that I attend has majority white staff. I didn't have a teacher of color until my freshman year, and I think I've only had 2 in my educational experience, and I'm a junior in high school. So I think all of the schools that I've attended, I've had such low rates of teachers of color, and I don't see any change happening in those schools because the neighborhoods that they are in are majority white neighborhoods. And so the teachers who live in those areas will choose time and time again to teach in those schools who are close to them. So even if the district is hiring diverse staff, but then letting those people still choose where they want to teach, how are schools that still have a majority white population going to change into having a more diverse staff?
And I'll take it. Teachers actually are hired by the administration at the school site. So it is up to each individual site to hire their teachers. Now, there are things like surplusing this year. As we decline in enrollment and we may have extra teachers, and teachers, we have less staffing, let's say at Rio. So a teacher or 2 may have to choose to go somewhere else. There's not as much choice then. But when I was a principal, I had the opportunity to hire who I wanted. Sometimes the district office does screening, but then it is up to each individual site. And that's one of the things we've been actually focusing on with our administrators is, take those opportunities to hire a more diverse workforce. And we're making progress, but it's slow, and we haven't made as much progress as we wish we would have. But we're going to continue, and the Alder Academy is a good example of taking a very different approach than we had in the past that may help us move a little quicker.
Can I jump in here real quick? This is Kent and I talk about this regularly, and the reality is this, that when we have a very qualified teacher and this person is brown, I'll say brown because I'm brown, okay, and we would love to say, hey, Mr. Hernandez, we want you to go teach at this school because our kids, we have a lot of brown kids there. You got to remember too, that right now, the way the world is, that down brown teacher, he can go teach at Sac City, Elk Grove, Rockland, El Dorado. So we're not only trying to get the people that we want to work for us, but we're fighting just to get that person to come to our district in general. That world. So it's in the perfect world, yeah, we'd love to be able to say we want 5 here, we want 5 here, we want 5 here, but it's tough out there right now. And you ask teachers, and I'm sure you ask Diana, we're competing right now. It's a real world issue right now. So we're doing really, really good things, but it's hard.
Thanks, all.
Hey, Kim, I just want to point out we're about 11 minutes over the allotted time for this agenda item. So since we have an adjournment time this evening of 8:30, I might recommend that we skip my presentation this evening and move on to the next agenda item, since we also have our listening session and we want to make sure we have time for committee business this evening.
I agree, John. We
Okay.
can definitely do that. Thank
Okay.
you.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Diana? And if not, Diana, is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
Oh, thank you for your time and opportunity to share. It's a passion, and we will continue to grow.
We thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
So at this time, we will have, let's see, our general visitor comments.
Yes, and we do not have any visitors this evening, so we can go.
We barely have
straight.
PAC members tonight.
So John, I'll turn it over to you to go ahead and introduce Cassie Bennett and the next topic.
Great. Thank you. All right, so for our next agenda item, we are going to learn about universal pre-kindergarten and engage in a listening session led by our Director of Elementary Education, Cassandra Bennett Porter. So Cassie, we're going to turn it over to you now to kind of lead us through this work here. Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me and for giving me the time to gather some input from this important group. So I'm going to talk to you today about universal pre-K, which is commonly known as UPK. So you may have heard of it, you may not. It's kind of related to new legislation. So I'm just going to explain a little bit of the background, and then I'd like to hear some of your thoughts and your ideas as we move forward. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the question, what is universal pre-K? Research has shown that pre-kindergarten has long-term positive impacts in schools. So we've known that for a long time, that kids who have an opportunity to attend pre-K or TK programs tend to do better, not only in kindergarten, but throughout their educational careers. And the pandemic has really highlighted the need for communities to provide expanded learning opportunities to all students, regardless of background, regardless of what zip code they were born in or what their socioeconomic statuses of their family, that all students could really benefit from expanded learning opportunities, and that students from marginalized communities could benefit even more. The legislation that was recently passed in 2021 is the Budget Act, and it's of 2021. It's an investment in early learning and equitable learning. So this legislation was really passed to support early learning programs and partnerships. So partnerships with community-based programs, partnerships with private programs, things like that. The priority areas for the legislation are to provide universal access to school for all 4-year-olds by 2025. And also to provide 9 hours of daily programming available to families who need it. Quality early education experiences for multilingual students and inclusive environments for students with disabilities are also priority areas. The final thing that the UPK initiative really talks about is alignment from preschool through 3rd grade, so that, there's not this kind of divide, like a child who's 3 or 4 goes to preschool, and then there's this big jump to kindergarten, and then they go to kindergarten first, and then there's a big jump to second and third, but there's a more kind of smooth transition across those early learning years that are really important. And later on in the presentation, I will talk about how this this legislation ties to the Lcap. Next slide. So as a result of this legislation, the programs that will be expanding in San Juan are our ECE classrooms, which is our California State Preschool and our Head Start programs, our transitional kindergarten classrooms. So as of now, we're slated to add 9 additional classrooms next year, and then they'll grow over the next 5 years. And then also a before and after school program. So that would include Bridges, Discovery Club, and we're also kind of looking for other community partnerships with organizations such as YMCA and CalTeach and some other folks that we're currently working with to try to expand those before and after school programs for that 9 hours of programming each day. Next slide. So this is really just a chart that shows the eligibility for TK and how that's going to shift over the next 5 years. So this year, students who turn 5 between September 2nd and December 2nd qualified for TK. Next year, that's going to be extended to February 2nd. The following year, it would be April 2nd. The year after that would be June 2nd. And then by 25-26, any student who turns 4 by September 1st would qualify for TK. So that could mean that if we have a child who turns 4 years old on, September 1st or August 28th, they might start school those first couple weeks. They might actually be 3-year-olds in TK programs, which is going to be new and different than what we've had before. Okay, next slide. So you might be wondering what the difference is between pre-K and TK. So when we're talking about pre-K, that's really our ECE programs. So those state preschool programs, Head Start, those programs, we have now shifted to where they are all full day, which full day for them is 6 hours of programming. There are income qualifications for students to attend our Head Start and our state preschool programs. So they're not available to everybody. And they serve 3 and 4-year-olds. They're play-based. The teachers use observational screeners, and there are preschool standards that they follow. There's a heavy emphasis on social emotional learning. And teachers who teach pre-K need to have ECE units. They are not required to have a multiple subject teaching credential as of right now. TK is a little bit different. It stands for transitional kindergarten. There is no income qualification, so just the age qualification. TK serves 4-year-olds who are turning 5. The hours vary. So some of our sites have a 3-hour and 20-minute TK, some have a 4-hour TK, and some have a full day, full 6-hour TK. So each site kind of chooses what they're going to provide in terms of programming, just like they do for kindergarten. Bridges, so TK bridges kind of your preschool and your kindergarten. So it's that year in between so it's a little more focused on curriculum and academics than the pre-K is. The TK teachers do use report cards, and they actually use the K-12 standards to assess their students. TK teachers are required to have ECE units and a multiple subject teaching credential. Next slide. Okay, so another thing that's happening as a result of this legislation is districts are getting the opportunity to have expanded learning opportunity programs, which we refer to as ELOP. So that means we are receiving additional funding to expand our before and after school programs and summer learning or intersession opportunities. So as a result of this, there will be 9 hours of programming available to families who need it. I think the requirement for UPK is that at least 50% of our low-income families are able to have access to a 9-hour day for their children. Next slide. Okay, so this is kind of where this group comes in. With UPK, there is a base funding, and there is a template that we have to adhere to as we're planning how to spend our money that talks about 5 different areas. As you can imagine, when we're talking about expanding programs and the number of students that we will be expanding to over the next 5 years, it's going to have a cost associated with it. So there's costs associated with, additional staffing, with teachers needing additional education, with the ratios that are required in terms of staff to student ratio. We're going to have to hire more instructional assistants. We need the facilities. So there's a lot of expense associated with this initiative. And the funding that we're getting is not intended to cover all of those expenses. So it's really interesting the way the CDE wrote the template and talking about partnerships, grant opportunities, like other funding sources that we could take advantage of to support the way that we're expanding our programs to our younger children. And the heavy emphasis on tying it to the Lcap really talks about how we're providing access to these programs for our socioeconomically disadvantaged students and families. There's a really heavy emphasis on supports and services for our multilingual students and families and engagement, and then inclusion for students with disabilities. So those targeted groups are definitely called out in this template, which would relate to the work of the Lcap. Next slide. Okay, so I know I went through kind of a lot of information that was a real general overview. I am going to be presenting a deeper report to the Board of Education in June. But at this point in time, before we move further in any planning, I really wanted to gather input from different groups within the San Juan community. So I will be gathering input from this group, and I'll also be gathering input from the parents who are on DLAC and the CAC parents, so the parents of students with disabilities, and I have lots of other groups that I'm going to be talking to about this initiative. And this may or may not relate to something that you're directly impacted by right now. I don't know how many of you have children who went to preschool or are in preschool, or maybe grandchildren in preschool. Or TK, but I wanted to give you a few minutes in a breakout room just to have some conversation with each other about what you're thinking about this universal pre-K legislation. And then I wanted to ask you some questions about what some of your experiences have been, what needs you think your family or the community might have for early childhood programs. Kind of given the choice, would you, because I was thinking some families might really want that 9 hours for their 3-year-old, but some families might think, wow, that's really too long of a day for a 3 or a 4-year-old. And then what are the implications for UPK on creating equity for families in terms of access to education and programs? So I think, Laura, if we could just break folks out into a few breakout rooms for just like 2 minutes. And that would be time for you to kind of gather your thoughts in terms of any questions you might have for me. I'll try to answer them the best I can. And then also what you're thinking about some of the questions that I have here on this slide. And I think Laura went ahead and put a PDF of the questions in the chat, so you can see them there too. All right.
Okay, so we have 10 people, so I'll put everybody into 2 breakout rooms. Steve, you made a really great comment in the chat box. That would be something great to share in your breakout room, and then coming back, you can share it as well. So if everybody is ready, I'll go ahead and open up the breakout rooms, and we'll give you just a couple minutes to kind of get your thoughts flowing.
Hi. Okay, is everyone back? Welcome back, everyone. To John's point, for this section, we had a kind of a stop time of 7:45. So within the next 12 minutes or so, I'll try to keep us on track. So I just wanted to have a general discussion after the presentation and after you had some time to talk with one another. This first question is just kind of what have your experiences been with pre-K learning, and that includes pre-K or TK. And I see that Steve put something in the chat. So we'll definitely include your feedback on this section. But is there anyone else who wants to share any experiences you've had with this?
Yeah, my children, they started off actually at 1.5, and they did the whole pre-K, TK, K, and they excelled. And so they were ahead of the game for school.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Just to add on to that, I'm like 95% sure that I don't have any kids, I'm a student, but I'm like 95% sure that I was in pre-K and TK programs. And I know I was started in school pretty early, and I am doing really well in school now. So I think that definitely has an effect on, I think Kim had said in our breakout room, like knowing how to behave in a classroom, learning how to communicate with the teacher, build relationships and connections. So I think that's definitely important.
Great.
I wanted to just piggyback on that. I shared the same. My kiddo didn't start with San Juan. We started with a Montessori program, but he started at 2.5, and I think that it fostered a love of learning. And I would love to see like elements of that Montessori curriculum more built into public education. I think that there's ways to just, foster STEAM and also being able to work outside, have outside workspaces. We talked about that. And I also, Elizabeth, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I always think about this because I only have one and done. But for parents that have more than one kid, there's like layers of how your kids have experienced TK. And for the students who are in TK now, it's very different than the way that my son experienced it, say 7-8 years ago. And I just think that that's important to really lift too.
Yeah, that's so true, Amber. It's funny. I have kids that range from I have 5 kids from 26 to 6. And so my 26 and 24-year-olds early learning experiences were very different from my 6 and 8-year-olds. And yeah, so I totally understand what you're saying.
Was that just in reference to the what I was saying, it was a half day TK?
For Amber.
Sorry, back at you, Amber. I just wasn't sure what you mentioned me. I was trying to figure out the tie-in.
I was saying you were talking about your 3 kiddos and their experience being a little bit different with TK.
Right. Yeah, I've only had one that did TK. It was a really positive experience. It was a half day, so I don't think there was an adjustment when she started kinder, but I think it definitely gave her a good edge, and being older also helped. And I've got a 4-year-old now who's in just a private preschool going half day also, but only 3 days a week.
So that kind of leads us into our next 2 questions, which we can kind of lump together just to save a little time. But kind of what needs does your family or community have? And then given the choice, would you prefer preschool or TK, half day, full day? What would the preference be? Or what do you think the preference would be for more people in the community?
I think it would probably be a full day, especially for parents who would like to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, full day. I like the full day TK personally as a parent, but I've just mentioned that my son still remembers it being a very long day for him. That's just, but he still talks about that sometimes.
Yeah.
Are we back in the breakout room, or we're in full group?
Full
We're in
group.
the
Tiffany.
Okay, because I'm sorry, my thing was acting stupid. I don't even know where I can see nothing.
I'll say, since I've had 3 go through preschool, I've worked full-time, I've worked part-time, and I've been stay-at-home mom. Definitely full day is easiest, especially when you're working on the parents. I think my kids tended to get tired, and like my current 4-year-old now, she also didn't get to go as long because of COVID. So it's kind of her first experience doing it. After a half day, she is really tired. By noon, she just wants to go straight to sleep. So I think sometimes that might be easier on the kids if it's feasible, but I remember having to juggle a lot of things to make that work when I was working at the time. And I'm sure that's not very doable. It was barely doable for me at the time. So I know that as far as parents go, it's a pretty difficult situation for half day.
Especially with multiple children in school.
Can I say something real quick?
Of course.
When she just said that it's easier on kids on half day, and of course it's gonna be easier on parents for full day. Have you guys seen a change in the last? Well, my kids are 16 and 17 now, but back when they're in kindergarten, they lasted longer for a full day. compared to kids now. Do you see, well, people that have older kids, they could probably say this. Have you seen the difference of today, of kids lasting and be able to last and have patience of a full day to compare to a part-time for kindergarten? Because my kids, yeah, full day was good for them compared to now they're, like she just said, they're tired and everything else. I don't know if it's a structure change or schedule or whatever, but I see the difference between this generation and prior to that.
I think
Yeah.
also the pandemic didn't help the situation. I mean, because I was saying my other two got to go to a couple of years of preschool and kind of ramped up. Whereas this year, you know, my youngest, we had to keep her home and she missed that. So she's 4 now and it's her first year of preschool. And I'm sure that doesn't help the situation, kind of being used to napping midday and then, you know, going right into it.
Yeah, so for the full day TK, there was a resting time. I think it was about 30 minutes. So sometime after lunch, I think it was probably
45
right
minutes.
after.
Yeah, hour.
Yeah. So yeah, and it was what it was for 4 and 5-year-olds taking a nap in the classroom. But you know, it speaks for itself, I guess.
Well, and that kind of
for me also full time is good. Like working women, especially, they need time for themselves, and kids when they are inside home and no one is there, it's really harder for them, even men also. But so if they will save and they learn more, they are with kids, they are with friends, so full time is really good.
Great, thank you. I think another element to this is just based on the descriptions of pre-K, which is heavily play-based and social emotional learning, versus TK, which is a little more academic. Did that bring up any thoughts for anyone? And I see some people nodding their heads, so feel free to speak out on that.
It's
I think
really
that's
like,
go ahead, Neelam.
okay, it's really like when the group is small, the age is small, then we have to take care of themselves like that. Like we have to provide them more playthings, more resting time, playing time, resting time, and then little bit learning time, because they are kid. If they can't get rest time when going to school also, they can't grow proper. And if they will not play, really it's not how they learn. And little bit learning is good for them, for the small kids being previous in charge. So I really say that for the age group, smaller group, 3 years like that, we need more time to give them play, rest, and then education, reading.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do agree with Neelam. I know with my children, they were young, they were acclimated to how school worked, but when they were younger, they really needed to learn how to be in school. And so that still was learning for them. And as they adjusted up, then more academics came in and they were able to do the academics, but at the same time, get in line, wait their turn, because those are things that they had learned in the previous year.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, because they had more energy when they came home after that nap. I had a hard time getting my kids to come inside and play, not the social media thing. So I think that the social media kind of plays into the effect of the balance of the sleep and attention span, because I see a lot of younger kids, younger, walk around with devices in their hand. And so instead of being outside, well, I got some kids out here playing right now, but I think that takes a factor of balancing with the attention span with the social media being affected on their patients.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's true.
So we just have about a couple more minutes left, and I want to get to this last question because it really is the most important question. But what do you see are the implications for UPK, which is the universal pre-K, which means we'll be serving more 3 and 4-year-olds in our communities for longer day. So what are the implications on that for creating equity for families?
In our group, we talked a lot about lower income families being able to work more, because I think that there's a discrepancy in the ability to pay for childcare between higher income families and middle income families versus lower income families. And those families who need to have a steady stream of income are the ones who would need childcare the most. So I think it's important to ensure that those families are able to work more, or even if you have single parents or people who want to work and they're a parent too, have more options in getting different jobs and having different amounts of income coming into their households.
Thank you.
I think also it helps to prepare the students.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, breakaway of that bonding of them being more independent. I started my kids at National Human Development. Nora was 2 and Javante was 4. And Nora, I worked at night nursing, and then was able to, so they got off at 7 in the morning, and then I dropped them off there and then for some reason, don't ask me why, I don't have the energy now, but as soon as I dropped them off there, I had to pick from 9 to 2. I went to ARC. No, I didn't go home to sleep. I got like 10 hours of sleep a week. Yeah, I can't do that now. It's catching up to me. But then it was that open time of either sleep or just doing errands or shopping or going to school, or since a person that works graveyard shift, balancing out of doctor's appointments and everything else. So that time of them going to school at that early age, it developed that them being, I guess that, you know, kids cry and they want the parents all day long if they be home until 5 and everything else. I guess I just started early. So that breakaway part. So I don't know. It just helped out.
Creating that independence, their kind of own identity, right? Away from mom or dad.
Yeah. It helps when you have 2 siblings side by side, kind of like, then they can just support each other.
Right. Okay, so I am kind of big on honoring time, and I want to thank you for your time. Although I do want to invite, if anyone did not get an opportunity to bring their voice to this topic, please feel free to do that. You can either put something in the chat or you can unmute. I will also add my email address into the chat if you have anything that you would like to add to the conversation. But ultimately, I just want to say thank you for your time and for your important feedback. I will definitely take all of this into consideration as I'm preparing for the board presentation in June.
Hey, Cassie.
And the thing is that the kids do not be unsocial. They will be social, and they grow being social because they found friend in the certain age. Here, I found that they stuck inside the room only playing or taking devices. So when they go, they really learn more and get a friend. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Cassie, I had to take a call from a board member while you're presenting. One of the big challenges that districts throughout the state, and when I'm with other large urban superintendents, we talk about this, are the facility issues related to this. And even when we get down to, we have schools already that don't necessarily have the space for this program. And so the availability to create full day versus half day sometimes are dictated by the space, which is really frustrating to us. If you have, let's say, half day kinder and you've got space half a day, you may not be able to offer a full day program because that's it. So we're trying to utilize, because the state's really not going to give us the funds we need to add the facilities to match this. But we are looking at what bond funds we have. And I know, for example, Cassie, I think we're adding some additional classes next year at Star King. And we're trying to stay ahead as we add these, where can we add space so that choice really is there for parents in the community.
Yeah, I had a pretty good conversation with Frank Camarda the other day about that very issue, because as I stated earlier, the allocation that we're getting for this is really definitely not enough to make all the changes that we need to make it work, including facilities. And he shared that, you know, I think Diana mentioned earlier, I was the principal at Dyer Kelly, and when they were building that new building, they built classrooms that would be Title V compliant, which we need for this program. And he said that all new construction since then, he has been building those kinder complexes with the preschool compliant classrooms But when we're talking about having to go and add classrooms at older or more existing buildings or buildings that were built before the Title V standards came about, we don't have the funds for that. So we're doing what we always do in education, trying to make it work. All right. And Laura, there are a couple more things in the chat. I just want to make sure those get into the document. So I'm going to save the chat on my computer, and then I put my email address there. So if anyone has anything else they want to add or any questions for me, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie.
Yeah. Thanks, Cassie. Oh, I just wanted to, if I could, just kind of say one thing for connecting this items kind of more directly to LCAP. The success of our LCAP is really kind of measured on the California School Dashboard, and this will move the needle on the California Dashboard. I think under student outcomes, state priority 4, which is English and math outcomes, which actually start measuring in the 3rd grade. So even though we may not see those needles move, I think it's important to make the investment now for the long-term improvements that occur, even if we won't see those needles move on the dashboard for several years. So I just wanted to say that before we close out this item. Thank you.
Yep, great point. Thank you, Tom.
Probably can answer this. Is it open for volunteers for parents come back now? As I stated that in chat, since the mask mandate and everything else to help out. Because before,
I think that's per school site, Stephanie.
Yeah, is it per school site or just doing it as district?
Trent talked about that this morning, didn't he?
Yeah, so we are able to have volunteers on campuses again. There is a process you have to go through to sign up to volunteer.
Yeah, background check. I just want to make sure if it's open like before, or we're limited.
With a few more restrictions in place, of course, due to COVID. So if you go to the school site, if you want to volunteer, if you're interested, you can go to the school site. They will give you the information that you need and the process to follow. And then, yeah, we're welcoming volunteers back on campus.
Maybe that will help out boost up motivation in kids and get back to school. Chronic absence.
All right. With that, I will leave you for the rest of your meeting, and thank you again.
Thank you, Cassie.
Thanks, Cassie.
So at this time, we'll do our attendance roll call. Laura.
Yes, thank you. At this point, we have 10 members, so let's go ahead and do so we don't have quorum, but let's go ahead and do a roll call. Deborah Avalos, Karen Brown, Kim Brown.
Here.
Amber Busby.
Here.
Elnora, Noria. See. Stephanie, you're on mute. Elnoria and Stephanie.
Here. Here.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth.
Here.
Chelsea. Serena.
Here.
Zena. Tom.
Here.
Neelam.
Here.
Natalie. Steve.
Here.
And Jacqueline.
Here.
Okay, so we've got 10 people, so we don't have quorum, so we are unable to approve the minutes tonight.
So we'll move on to our committee business. So the first discussion item on our committee business is in-person meetings. I'm not too sure if the district office is available to us or not. So maybe you could answer that, or John?
Yeah, I think it would be. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be.
Okay.
John, you agree?
Yes, we could definitely come back to in-person in the district office. We just have to make sure that there isn't a conflict with another group that might be using the space.
Yeah, and we can look at the calendar going forward, and even if we had to, we could use Digital Edge. That's enough space too.
Yeah, I have the boardrooms booked through the end of the year. We were recently potentially bumped out for April due to some classified staff hearings that may need some space. However, I've asked if we could have the boardroom back if they determine they don't need it.
Okay, so I guess I want to kind of get a pulse from our LCAP PAC to see if you would prefer in-person meetings moving forward or Zoom meetings, or to be able to have the flexibility of choosing between the two. So I guess let's do with a show of hands with back to in-person. And the thing is, you can choose all three if you like to, but just a show of hands of in person.
Yeah, and Kim, I believe we can't vote on this tonight because
No, we're not voting on this
Okay.
at all. Because we have to hear from all of our other PAC members as well.
Perfect.
But I just want to get a pulse of where everyone is.
You got it.
Okay, and then also with a show of hands, who would want the flexibility of being able to choose whether they can do in person or Zoom before a meeting? Okay, all right, perfect.
Wasn't that based off of if they were ill? If they just said, let's just say, if knowing they want to go back in person, but then suddenly they got ill, what if they can log into Zoom while we're in the meeting?
Correct, right. So we're looking at those three options, whether just in person, staying on Zoom, or having the flexibility to do either or.
I think that either or, because just in case somebody gets sick, but they still can log in.
Okay, and we're going to push this forward to our next agenda, just so we can hear voice from all of our PAC members, and then we'll make a decision once we make quorum. Okay, so we'll move on to the LCAP PAC directory posted on LCAP website. That's something else we're going to move till the next meeting. And but our Connected Schools subcommittee, we can actually hear from them tonight if they have anything that they would like to share.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, we've had 2 great meetings so far in our subcommittee. Our first meeting was basically a welcome and a short training that Tom did a great job kind of what Connected Schools means, what parent engagement means, and we had a nice discussion about how everyone kind of sees that, and then tied it back into you know, what the formal definition of that is as far as the district and CDE and whatnot. The second the second meeting, we had more of a discussion on prioritizing kind of what we wanted to focus on based on our first meeting suggestions. So we asked if we could prioritize, you know, essentially what we wanted to focus on. We chose 3 of the items that we kind of were top of the list were, so we kind of mentioned that every school site could have a parent ambassador. You know, these are all just ideas, like identify a volunteer which could have a relationship with their prospective board member based on the school site. You know, also every school have some parents fill out a self-reflection tool on parent engagement, and could we get also parents on site council to fill that out, PTAs, PTOs, and other organizations within the school site. Let's see. And then also, could LCAP board liaisons put LCAP recommendations on the board agenda? You know, recommendation to the school board that would be voted on formally by the entire PAC. So it'd be something that would be a recommendation that everyone would participate in a formal vote, and then if that could get on as an agenda item. And I think, Tom, if you have anything to add to what we discussed. Is he on mute? I think you're on mute, Tom.
Yeah, there were, we had essentially there were kind of 6 ideas that originally came forward, and then we just got a consensus among the subcommittee as to which ones seemed to be the highest, most interest in, and so it kind of winnowed down to 3. So I'm not sure. I guess at some point we should see how many people in the PAC at large is interested in whether one of the 3 in particular is one that we want to make take a formal vote on as a recommendation to go to the school board.
If anyone would like to join, they're still taking anyone that wants to be a part of the subcommittee that's a PAC member.
Oh yeah. And when is our next meeting?
20, I believe it's the 29th, but I have to look at the calendar just to be sure. Yeah, it's Tuesday the 29th at 6 p.m. We moved it from 5 to 6 p.m. and it's about an hour long.
Okay.
And I
So
think that's
How many
pretty
are on the
much it.
subcommittee?
That's what a meeting's about. I can.
About 7.
yeah, since well, let's see, since Elizabeth is here and also Neelam, if there's anything that you care to reference about the subcommittee meeting. Okay.
No, I think you guys covered it. It's a good group if anyone wants to join.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll move on
Good
to
group,
our,
and we can like how to manage the parent ambassador and how to deal with board. The thing is going on, and we are thinking all, and we are grateful, all our group. Thank you.
thank you, Neela. Okay, we'll move on to our future agenda items. There was one agenda item. It was back in September 16th, and it had to do with an action to recommend to post the Lcap PAC Zoom link 72 hours prior to the meeting. And then action 2 recommended to board to post school board YouTube channel links more than 15 minutes prior to the meeting. So action 1 we covered, action 2 we did not. And it was because of a misunderstanding. And so I'd like for us to revisit that. This is a motion that Tom had brought forth. And so I'd like to put this on our next agenda. And then there are a few items on our future agenda items that were not addressed. Many of them have been addressed, but some of them weren't. And so I'd like to just share a few of them. So Steve Rubens had said December 16th that he'd like to revisit where students are socially and emotionally, any issues dealing with socially and emotional issues. So that's one agenda item that had not been addressed yet. Stephanie also brought that up as well. Serena brought up at the same meeting would like a more detailed explanation of certain traditional English learner student programs and how they are welcome to the district after they come from different countries. She also said it would be interesting to see how much money is going to these programs and would like a detailed report of what transitional programs we have for them. And Stephanie asked, is there an independent study program or hybrid that would help students? And I think we kind of were discussed that with students who have independent study now, maybe if there was some form of hybrid that they would get more support to complete their academics. And then Heather Gonzalez brought up in January, how do we as a district better support equity and inclusion efforts from the student and equity teams on campus, culture and climate? So those are a few that that have not been addressed. There are some that we just addressed in our last meeting, but these are some that kind of are still on our list, have not been addressed. And so we may want to think about these, I'll send it out again and do what we did the last time, where you can look at everything that has not been addressed yet and make a decision on which are the priorities for our team. And if there are any other future agenda items that anyone would like to add, you can do so right now.
You
just
can
wanna
do
make-
it.
Go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to make sure that the climate survey gets on our next meeting, since we weren't able to do that tonight. And John's presentation on the self-assessment tool.
And in all honesty, John, if you have time tonight, we can actually go through that because our committee business is done. There are no visitor comments. So if you wanted to go through that tonight, we could.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Oh.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
John, we need to clarify, because I think because we're a public entity, because of the governor stating that we need to go back to public meetings, I think if we're going to choose to go to Zoom, we have to vote the prior month that we're going to entertain the meeting next month in Zoom. And it has to be done like that every month. Am I right, Kent? Because we do that for facilities, that it has to be done a month prior, that if you're going to choose to go Zoom, you have to, well, I will clarify that, but I think I'm right.
So one thing I can clarify is that we're a Green Act
Okay.
group, so we are exempt from having to do that voting every month, which you're absolutely correct that Brown Act groups do.
Okay, I apologize.
No apologies necessary.
That was a good question, Saul. Thank you.
So Kim, you'd like me to do the presentation now?
I would, yeah. We still have 25 minutes left, and I figure if you could do it now, and then for our PAC members who were not in attendance tonight, they can still see the video to get a better understanding and clarification.
Yes, and by the way, folks, I'm sorry for, I'm getting over a cold tonight, so I apologize for looking a little under the weather here, so.
No, John, I noticed a lot of folks are sniffling tonight. Even I was just like, I don't think you're the only one.
Yeah.
Allergies.
Yeah.
I was telling Lauren, I've been telling other groups that I have an 18-month-old daughter, and I'm convinced that she's trying to kill me with the germs that she's bringing back from daycare. So I'm just trying to survive fatherhood at this point, but as many of you already know that. So anyway, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to provide you with an overview of our parent involvement and family engagement self-reflection tool. So Laura, if you want to go to the next slide here. So the self-reflection tool, let me just adjust my screen here, my apologies. Here we go. The self-reflection tool is a California Department of Education requirement that is completed annually and reported on the California School Dashboard as a local indicator. And so the self-reflection tool enables districts to reflect on the implementation of family engagement policies, programs, and practices. It's also an opportunity for the district to self-report their strengths, progress, and areas for improvement related to family engagement. And it informs our continuous improvement work, Lcap, and district plans as well. Next slide, Laura. Thank you. So the process requires districts to identify a focus group of diverse educational partners, and then ask the focus group for input on data that should be considered when the district self-reflects on its progress in the following 3 areas listed here. And then the district self-rates the current stage of implementation using local data, as well as the focus group input on the data to use. And then we use those findings to inform our Lcap and other district plans. So focus group representatives will include members from the educational partners that we've engaged throughout the year in the development of our Lcap, ELO, and ESSER 3 expenditure plans, since they represent our diverse educational partners of families, staff, students, and targeted groups. And then we're also collaborating with our FACE department, who is supporting us by contacting and inviting representatives to participate in the focus groups as well. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what what this will look like when we come together as a focus group. Our agenda will include introductions, an overview of the self-reflection tool and process that's similar to what I just shared with you all just now. It'll be followed by a group discussion, an opportunity for participants to reflect on and rate San Juan's progress in the areas listed on the tool, and then considerations for additional data to be used in the self-reflection process. And then finally, we'll be sharing next steps. So in the group discussion, we're going to ask the focus group to identify strengths and progress, areas for improvement, and how we can improve engagement of underrepresented families in each of the 3 categories. And again, these categories and prompts are directly aligned to the self-reflection tool. Then we will ask the focus group members to individually reflect on and rate San Juan's progress in the same 3 areas from the discussion using the following rating scale, which is also aligned to the self-reflection tool. And then next, we will share the local data that San Juan will be using to self-reflect and report progress, which includes but is not limited to the community engagement process that we have used to develop our district plans, such as the Lcap, ELO, and ESSER 3 plan. Our local indicator data from priority 1, 6, and 7, which is like a teacher assignments, school climate survey, and course access. We will also be using Lcap metrics and actions to help inform our ratings. And then finally, the focus group input that we are engaging in with the group at that time. At that point, we will ask the group for additional data and information that San Juan should use to consider when completing the self-reflection tool, which again is part of the requirement. And then finally sharing the next steps, which would be for us to reflect and analyze the focus group input and local data, respond to each of the prompts in the 3 sections of the tool, and then using the findings from the self-reflection tool to inform the Lcap and other district plans. So you can see we're really following the process that CDE provides to us, but we're also going above and beyond that by engaging our focus group in a conversation and discussion around a lot of the prompts and questions that are on the self-reflection tool as an additional data point that we will use in our self-reflection process. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or clarifying questions that you may have about this. All right, Tom, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, as I understand it, the self-reflection tool last year did with, I think it was 11 parents, so you got 11 responses, and then somehow basically, I don't know, crunched those numbers or did an average or something. But on the California School Dashboard, you have those 12 areas that there is a rating put in each area of 1 through 5. So what is the process or the formula or the algorithm? Because if you're going to have, I don't know, you mentioned you're going to have focus groups. So if you have like one focus group that only has 3 people that do the self-reflection and another focus group that has 100, do you just do like, are you just going to do like 103 responses and then find out what the average is, or are you going to take the mode? Are you going to do averages, a total average of all responses, or are you going to find out like the averages of this focus group and the average of that focus group and then average the averages? So I'd like to know what the process is where somebody could say, oh, here is all the data, and you run it through the algorithm and everybody comes up and understands the process and can say, yeah, this is the number that we will put on when we report this on the dashboard.
Yeah, Tom, I just want to re-clarify that there's going to be one focus group that includes representatives from the groups that we shared. And 2, it's a self-reflection tool, so there isn't, it's qualitative. That includes, it's a qualitative self-reflection that the LEA does on their progress in those areas. And we do that by referencing the data that I mentioned before, which includes everything from the process that we've used to develop our Lcap plans, our actually very similar to our mid-year report in terms of our progress towards meeting our actions and our data, but also the input that the focus group gives us regarding to like, hey, thank you I'm glad to know that you're going to be looking at this data in your self-reflection. We'd also like you to consider these additional data pieces as well.
Okay, but the tool that is reported is quantitative. There's a specific number of 1 through 5 in each of those areas. So that is a quantitative summary. So my question is, how is there an algorithm or formula where you'll get other quantitative, you'll be collecting quantitative responses of these ratings of 1 through 5, and then using this collection of quantitative data to come up with another quantitative report that will show on the dashboard.
Right. Again, we're using qualitative and quantitative data and using that information to create a quantitative self-reflection number. And so that process will come from a discussion that the LAA has, a self-reflection process that the LAA has that considers all the different data that I mentioned. And then based off of that information, we self-assess ourselves in that area of progress.
Oh, okay.
So very similar to like, is there an algorithm for a discussion? It isn't. It's a discussion. And then through that discussion, you have to build consensus, and through the self-reflection process and the different data that we collect, we are able to then do a self-assessment based off of that information. So there is no algorithm to develop the final rating on the local indicator tool, which, by the way, I just want to point out is not what is the intention of the tool.
Right. I mean, the real intention of the tool, I think, is to bring about these conversations and discussions.
At the LAA level, in terms of to self-reflect, correct.
Yeah, but that's it. I still see it as taking quantitative data and running it through a process that can be objective. It sounds like you're by taking this quantitative data, you're running it through a subjective process that then makes the final report that shows up on the dashboard essentially subjective, instead of where you could use an objective algorithm and say, this is the way we took the quantitative data we collected, we ran it through an algorithm and produced a objective quantitative result that's summarized on the dashboard.
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of both, Tom. People are going to have different perspectives in terms of how we performed in each of these areas. And that's part of the self-reflection process and the discussion that we have as an LEA. So I'll give you an example. In terms of family engagement, we've definitely increased the number of educational partners that we've engaged with in terms of our Lcap, ELO, and ESSER 3 development plan. There's going to be some discussion that says, great, we've made improvement in that area. But there's also going to probably be some discussion around how can we improve? And so that'll be part of the conversation. So there is no algorithm to capture that. It is part of the self-reflection process with multiple people in the LEA.
Okay. And so the final focus group, like last year, there were 11 people involved. Do you know how many people are going to be involved in determining the final report, or the final, I guess the final outcome that will be put onto the dashboard?
Well, I can't give you an exact number, like I said, because we are reaching out to all the groups that were on the list that I provided, that I showed. We're also trying to work with our family and community engagement department this year as well to engage our educational partners through this process as well. But ultimately, it'll be a decision whether or not folks attend or not. And that'll be another bit of information in terms of, if we're making improvements or other different ways that we can engage our partners in this discussion. I'll point out that I want to make sure that while of course our goal is to always engage more folks in the conversation, the intention of this tool is not about more in number, right? So you could have, the intention of this tool is to have a focus group that represents our diverse community. So for example, you could have 100 people attend that represent one group, right? That would actually not be, just because there's more people, that wouldn't actually make it more valid. You could have 10 people in the room that accurately represent our diverse community. And because you have members from different groups, that one could argue that that is a more accurate representation and more valid sort of response to what we're looking for. So the point being is that, of course, we're trying to always engage more folks. However, we're being really intentional in making sure that we get a diverse group in the room, since that is part of the intention of the tool.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for describing how it's, and in the end, when you actually do the report, will we get information as to how many people did participate?
Yes, and I believe we did that last year as well, Tom. I think that was included in the report. So again, that'll most likely be shared as well.
Okay, all right.
I'd like to know, for validity reasons, will it be random selection, or how are people, what does that process look like? Because you're inviting from all those different groups so that it is diverse, but how are you making the decision on who will be a part of that process?
So I'll answer it in two ways. One, I just want to point out that there's no standard provided by the California Department of Education,
of course,
statistical validity on this, because that's not the intention of the tool. That being said, we are working with our FACE department who will reach out to members. So like sometimes it's the leads of the different departments of the groups, and saying, hey, we're looking for a couple folks. And then the group then can decide who they would like to represent the group.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and sometimes, and so it's really kind of, we're just reaching out to folks in each of those groups and letting the groups kind of determine who they would like to send. But of course, sometimes it might just require us, because we might struggle with getting in touch with folks, a direct phone call, like, hey, would you like to participate? So it is a little bit of both.
Okay, well, I was just asking because I know with random selection, you get a more accurate description of what the majority of people are actually thinking and feeling, qualitative and quantitative. So that's why I wondered, what was that process like, other than selecting certain individuals, because you can almost select certain people and know what that outcome is going to be.
Yeah, we're not selecting individual people. Like I said, we're reaching out to the folks who might represent the group, who might be like the leader of the group, or who might be the parent, like the liaison or the co-chair of the group, and then letting the group figure out who they would like to send.
I see.
Yeah, I think really a lot of this value of the tool is for people to have those conversations about the tool. So I see it as the biggest benefit, I think, would be if you can engage more people to engage and just talk about what their results are, which is why I think one of the recommendations from the subcommittee that we were considering is suggesting that parents at every school site, because then every school site will then, at least at some level, engage in a conversation of what parent engagement is at that school site, where the way you're doing it, there may be school sites that may not be involved at all or have those conversations. And realistically, you're probably going to get those parents that are more involved and more affluent because they have the time to engage than if you kind of say every school site. So then you'll just get the more affluent representation from maybe the more affluent schools, and the less affluent schools won't be kind of required to have that conversation, which creates greater inequity.
So two things. A lot of the prompts on the self-reflection tool are specifically geared for districts and LEAs to self-reflect on themselves. So those prompts, I don't believe, would be very beneficial to a conversation at the site level. We do use the climate survey. I know it's not a discussion, but in terms of more input that's related to the school site level, that comes in at the survey level. That's where that information can come in. And then in terms of the targeted groups, actually, Tom, that's a really great point. One thing we've been able to do is when we ask the focus group to do the tool, they're going to have the option of one selecting, are they a student, staff, parent, community member? So that'll give us some information of who's responding in our focus group. And two, they'll have the option of selecting, do they represent one of our following targeted student groups as well? So that'll also give us some information as well that will, to make sure that we're reading and interpreting the additional input that we're asking our focus group to help kind of guide our conversations.
When the information is collected from the focus groups, will we be able to make comparisons where we see like one focus group gave really high ratings and another focus group really low ratings? So then we can kind of see where parent engagement, because this tool is parent engagement, and really parent engagement really occurs at the site level, which is why I wish the CDE would actually require this to be data that's collected at the site level, not just at the district level, because then you're tending to collect it from the parents that have more of a connection with district level when parent engagement is most important and it occurs at the site level.
Well, we'll have to, I'm going to disagree a little bit on that, because that's why we're intentionally reaching out to the diverse educational partners that we've been working with in terms of developing our Lcap, ELO, and ESSER 3. In order that intentionality is to actually address that issue that you're bringing up, Tom. So we'll see actually in the focus group what that actually looks like. It's going to tell us something, but that's why we are reaching out to our diverse educational partners from those groups, because those groups do in fact represent our diverse district.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for the information. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you, John, for presenting that, because I know a lot of our PAC members were a little confused. They were thinking that it was a survey versus a focus group. And with your explanation of clarifying that it's a focus group, it sheds more light on why it was only 11 people.
Yeah, and Kim, if I could just add one final thing. Thank you for bringing that up. It's not a survey. It's a self-reflection tool. And also, I just want to thank Tom and Steve, who attended. We were asked by the Sacramento County Office of Education to present the way that we're doing our self-reflection tool as a best practice, as a good example of what it should look like. So we've the county office has had a chance to kind of weigh in a little bit, and then I know that Tom and Steve were also able to attend and see that part as well. So again, thank you for giving me the time to share this today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Right.
So Laura did let me know that we did make quorum, and so we're going to revisit our approval of our minutes.
Would someone like to make a first motion?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, and how about a second motion?
I second.
Okay, Steve. So let me do a quick run through. Let's see. So, oh, here's Stephanie. I was just talking to Stephanie on the phone and she gave verbal approval because her call dropped off, but it looks like she's joining us. So I'll run down the list of members. Amber, do you approve the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Elnoria and Stephanie, do you approve the minutes?
Yes, that's how to still her
Thank
phone.
you. Elizabeth, do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Serena?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Thank you. Neelam?
Yes.
And Jacqueline?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Kim? Aye.
Oh, Kim,
That's okay.
I'm so sorry. And not to forget Kim. Okay,
Steve-
minutes are
and
approved.
Steve says yes too. I just did the second, so.
Oh,
yes.
Steve said, okay. Minutes
It's
are
getting late.
approved.
I want to leave everyone with just some words of encouragement. So believe in yourself, stay strong, never give up, be grateful, work hard, stay humble, be kind, and just keep smiling.